What was the sense from Israelis about Australia's response? Do they feel they've been showed solidarity?
Look, they were incredibly grateful for our presence. It's only 2 months into the conflict and that we were there, that we were listening to them. The 6 of us, 4 coalition members, 2 ALP members who represent some of the biggest Jewish communities in Australia. But equally, Assistant Minister Tim Watts was there on the Wednesday as well. So they were extremely grateful that we were there to listen to them and to see for ourselves what had happened. Obviously, the United Nations vote overshadowed the end of the trip because that came through on Wednesday night, and they felt very, it's fair to say, let down by that vote. There had been an earlier statement in the day with Canada and New Zealand that had recognised the devastation caused by Hamas and the need to eradicate the terrorist threat, but the UN vote itself didn't have any of those caveats in it. So obviously there was some disappointment in that, but that was expressed clearly and patiently and respectfully for Australia. But it would have been better had we actually been much clearer in relation to that UN vote and either abstained or ensured that the resolution had the notification about Hamas and what it had done and the need to eradicate Hamas as a political and military force in Gaza.
Was there much discussion with those that you met in Israel as to the international reporting, perceptions of the conflict, the protests we're seeing around many nations, including here, in support of the Palestinian cause, and how that is seen alongside the atrocity of October 7 and the fact that more than 100 hostages remain in the captivity of that terrorist group, Hamas?
To be fair, everyone we met with was also focused on the welfare of the Palestinian people. They were also focused on what a post-Hamas state will look like in the occupied territories of Palestine. So there was constant reflection on what needed to build back Gaza as quickly as possible to ensure that it is de-radicalised and prosperous in due course. That said, there was a real surprise that there was a lot that we didn't know before we went there. We didn't know the full extent, for example, of the sexual violence that had been perpetrated on the 7th of October. And we were hearing stories for the first time about what had happened. And we were surprised, frankly, that we had not heard more back in Australia, back in the global or international press about what had happened. The events of 7 October are truly harrowing. We were in the control room in Sderot, both with the Mayor and also the Minister of Defence, Benny Gantz, and we watched a video of a father and daughter who, when the sirens went off in Sderot, they did what they meant to do. They jumped out of their car and they ran for the closest bunker for protection. Except that this time it wasn't a missile coming overhead, it was terrorists in the back of a ute. They shot the father, and we watched the 4-year-old girl run back and forth from her father to the car, to her father to the car, and not knowing where to go or what to do. It is the most harrowing of experiences, nothing like what anything Israel has seen in the 75 years of existence. In terms of loss per capita, it's 10, 13 times what happened on 9/11. So you can understand their dismay when we don't actually know exactly what happened. So it was important to listen to those stories to understand what it means for Israel and why this time they have no choice but to eradicate the terrorist threat on their doorstep.
Well, exactly, and there is absolutely that determination to do that, and Benjamin Netanyahu is the Prime Minister that will obviously, that they see as the person to get that done. But politically, and it's hard to go from what you just described to the politics because of just how harrowing that is and what you heard and saw there. But from everything I've picked up out of Israel, people I've spoken to that live there, that report out of there, the various stories we've seen, Netanyahu won't be in the position for a day longer than they destroy Hamas, because he was in the job when this atrocity was perpetrated, when this intelligence failure was experienced by Israel.
There's a certain acceptance that things will change. Politically, things will change in Israel once the war is concluded. The head of intelligence has already indicated he's likely to stand down. Israel knows that many mistakes were made in the lead up. Israel can now see that the Hamas tunnels are being built since 2014, but that they were not aware of the full extent of what those tunnels enabled. Equally, they know that they ignored advice from young female intelligence officers. We heard that we met with women's groups and they told us not only about the sexual violence on the 7th, but equally that young women who'd been watching Hamas, who'd been watching role plays of the actual terror that they executed on the 7th of October and had put up the flag to say there's a problem here, we have a problem. Israel knows that there was a kind of prevailing groupthink at the time that said, no, it's not at that point yet, they're not that capable. So Israel knows it has a lot of work to do. They have a lot of work to do politically, they have a lot of work to do militarily and in terms of their intelligence services. But the war must be concluded first. Their people must feel safe at home. The thing people forget is that 200,000 Israelis are living in hotels, cramped hotels in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem because they can't go home. They've been evacuated from the southern border, they've been evacuated from the northern border. We met some of those families in the Ramallah. It was a wild Hanukkah night and there were hundreds of people in the foyer lighting candles and singing, and Tim Watts was there and he met with some of those families as well. So credit to him for doing that. But it's really a very difficult time because people don't feel safe going home. They just don't feel safe going home.
Zoe McKenzie, member for Flinders, we appreciate your time and your reflections on your delegation to Israel. Thanks.